Today's episode is going to be a fastball right down the pipe for some of you. It's about a topic that most business owners and most IT professionals love and hate all at the same time. It's about cybersecurity threats, and most importantly, what the heck happens if you are hit with ransomware? Your data is now upside down and encrypted, you can't access resources, and you've got people wanting big ransom dollars. What is it that you do next? Well, my next guest, Zack Lewis, has been through it. He's been there. He's done that. He's an IT professional. He's a cybersecurity expert. You're going to hear all about the school he worked for being hit by a ransomware attack, what he had to do, what they thought of, the decisions made, and what ensued in the days, weeks, and months after. Zack also has a book about it coming out on January 6th called Locked Up. And in the description section of this episode, you'll see a link to that book so you can pre-order it. Zack brings a lot of experience and a great story and a great ending, most importantly. I think you'll enjoy this episode if you care about the cybersecurity of your business and or if you are responsible for the cybersecurity of your business. Let's dive in. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Zack, welcome to 10,000 Miles. Good to see you here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Vic, for having me. I've been really wanting to do this for a while. Just real happy to be here, man.
Well, thank you for saying that. You know, there are a number of reasons why I was looking forward to having you on today. And if I might, first of all, we were introduced by somebody I respect a ton, Kate Ladon, who I stumbled across thanks to LinkedIn, and then have become a big fan of her approach, you know, her personality, her smarts, everything about her is just very addictive. And when she introduces me to people, they're always, not sometimes, they're always very high quality, high caliber people. So, and you did not disappoint. So I'm appreciative of you coming on and sharing your story with me today.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Yeah, great. Kate's fantastic. Every post she puts out is like another nugget of information that I didn't already know, and I really appreciate that.
It really is. You know, that's one reason. The second one is that you're an author. You've got a book coming out in early January. I've got a couple of books out. I've got a third one on the way. I have a ton of respect for the process, having gone through it. My first one took me 7 years. The second one took me 4 months. Yeah. This one by the time it's done will have taken me about 6 months, just really due to schedule. But the process now I understand and know how to buckle down and do it. Be interested on your take on it. But lastly, because of the topic, you know, you're discussing sort of the real world, real life circumstances of a cyber attack and what goes on during it, you know, maybe what you might have been thinking about before, during, and after, and certainly what you learned and what you bring back into resiliency. And I think the book is really going to be a good insider's look at something people fear. People fear, I'm in the technology industry, obviously. And everybody, there are two things people worry about: a disaster and a cyber attack. And they're like this, crossing their fingers if you're not on video, praying none of those things ever happen. And when they do, despite the playbooks, they whip them out. There's always some twist to the circumstance. So while the playbooks are a good guide, you are making real-time decisions. So, hey, before we jump in the book, because I'm accelerating here at such a rapid pace, how about you introduce yourself to the audience? Let them know who you are, what you're up to, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So again, Zack Lewis. I serve as the CIO and CISO for the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis, a small private university. I've been in higher ed for 10, 11 years. Before that, I did work in some tech startups. I was in the energy sector, coal companies, things like that, did some consulting, really just the gambit of various industries. But I've sort of made my claim to fame for what that is in higher ed these last few years as I worked through the ransomware incidents and done various talks and publications. But Locked Up is my book. It drops January 6th and really tells the story of a real-world ransomware incident. And I'm just trying to educate the masses, give a guidebook, if you will, a how-to on what goes into a ransomware attack, whether that's before, after, during decision-making process, why we make some of the decisions we make, and things that might affect you and your business if that ever comes to fruition and you have to deal with a ransomware incident yourself.
It's awesome. In looking at your LinkedIn and from our past conversation, you've built a nice career, which continues and you continue to thrive. Did you always know you had an affinity for technology? How'd this all come about?
Yeah. I mean, when I was real young, I always liked talking, and I thought I'd be in something that did a lot more talking, interacting with people. And then that slowly started morphing into computers. After I got my first computer pretty young, I really liked working on them, tweaking with them, playing with them. Got into high school and took some advanced level courses there because I didn't want to do some of the normal, I don't know, early entry level high school stuff. So
Hmm.
they put me into some advanced curriculum in there, and I really enjoyed that. And that translated into college, where I knew I wanted to be in IT and really wanted to be a system administrator, working on servers and computers and fixing them. And then once I kind of got that role, the next goal, it's always goalpost setting, right?
Yeah,
Along the way, like, oh, wanted to do this. So I got into IT, and then I wanted to be a sysadmin. I became a sysadmin. And then I was like, I want to be a CIO. And that has kind of been that was kind of the dream for a few years until I was able to grab that and started getting introduced to security and what was required there. I took on a role leading an IT department that didn't have security at all in the organization. So I started realizing I needed to build that and understand it and learn it. So read a bunch of books, start building a team, building the finding the tools and everything, and just trying to pull it all together and kind of taking off from there. Really.
that's pretty cool. So you've been focused on IT for quite a long time.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It's funny, a lot of people I talk to, um, I'd say the majority, IT found them. IT found them from business people who had an acumen for understanding how to leverage technology to make businesses better, to other creative types who have found creative outlets in technology because it's, you create things, whether you code or build infrastructure, or you're a digital guy or a gal or into security. Like there is an artistic meeting of the science. There's a good feel. You get that same feeling. And being a musician and formerly in the music business, I know that firsthand. I remember early on building my first websites felt like I was writing songs.
yeah,
It
sure,
was a creative outlet for me, and I liked it because you can start with a clean slate. When you're done, you have something, and you're sort of figuring out where the pieces and parts go. And so, but very interesting. I mean, congrats on that focus, because I'd say it's less than 50% the people I come across who went after technology versus technology going after them. So it's
yeah.
pretty neat.
I got a very real tunnel vision sight focus on things sometimes that I want to do. And I decided, deciding early on I wanted to do IT. It just was like, that's going to happen. We're going to go right there and do what you got
That's
to
a
do to get it
quality.
done. So,
That's a quality. That's really great. So I want to jump into this book, maybe give us the backstory of what
yeah.
happened to the extent you can share it. I'm going to lay it out. I want to talk about the backstory of the incident. I really want to spend a lot of time in what happened, but I also want to really unpack sort of like where you said, I should write a book about this. Boy, this would be value. Like I could share this experience. People might not have been through it. I'm thinking that's what you were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you were thinking that you say, hey, if I can share this experience, this could lead back to me. I'm a talker. I want to go out and talk to people and get on some speaking engagements. So I'm making all these assumptions, and some of them we discussed a little earlier on, which they were right, but there's more there. So do me a favor. It's day zero. You are where you are, and all of a sudden the bells start going off. Like,
Yeah.
tell me about this.
Yeah. So I was, it was April 13th, about 4:30 in the morning. So obviously I'm asleep. I'm not up yet. And then I get a call. I get a call from one of my team members. They said they're having some trouble accessing some resources. So this was during the middle of COVID. Supply chain had been very tough during that point. So there had been, I think there was a canal blockage of a major shipping lane. We have with COVID happening, we're not getting parts made. Everyone's at home, so things were really hard on the IT side in terms of getting hardware and support and stuff. And that becomes important because we have a lot of end of life equipment, and we think that we have stuff on order, but it's taking forever to arrive. So I get this call, and we're under the assumption early on that our equipment has just failed. Like it's end of life. We know it's end of life. Things aren't working. So I do some testing. I can't hit anything, so I kind of call in everybody. We muster the forces. We roll into work a little early, and we start doing some troubleshooting. We managed to get the environment back up in a day or two. For the most part, the campus didn't notice anything was down. We have some applications that the students would use or faculty would use that are cloud-based. They're in the SaaS, so they're not affected by our outage. So kids are still learning. They're getting taught. But on the back end, we're scrambling, trying to figure out what's going on, in a bit of a panic. We get everything stood back up, and then the very next day after standing everything up, it all crashes again. And at this point, again, no cyber attack. We don't know of any cyber attack. We have no indicators that that's going on. We think this is just a disaster recovery, hardware failure sort of situation. After that second outage, we go back in. We think like, oh man, they say end of life. They really mean end of life, right? Like this stuff is, we're going to limp it across the finish line here. But when we try to do the same sort of recovery procedures that we did before, it doesn't work. And while in our system, we find what's called a README note. And inside that, and it's not something you want to see. Anytime you find a README that isn't supposed to be there on a system that's kind of collapsed and not working, you start to sweat bullets. You have a real sinking feeling in your stomach, and things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. So I opened that note up, and it's a ransomware note saying that they've encrypted our systems. They've taken a bunch of our data. We're going to need to pay a very large, several $1 million fine. And not to contact law enforcement, not to contact insurance providers or really anything, and just to get this ball rolling. So very nerve-wracking situation. And that's when we just stop all disaster recovery procedures, and we sort of shift into this incident response mode where we don't want to take anything down. We don't want to turn anything off. We need to preserve whatever forensic evidence we can to try to track down what's really going on. And that's the start of the ransomware incident.
So you come across this README. It's a text file, right? It's probably readme.txt. And it's not supposed to be there. But how much do you buy into it initially? Are you convinced this is what's happening just because of that note? Or did you feel like you had to do some other validation? And how did you measure sort of the severity of that note relative to what was happening?
Yeah. I mean, when you see the README note, just the text of what it's called, like, you get worried. I mean, it's not supposed to be there. And then opening up and seeing the contents of it, really sets off all the alarms. And at that point, we were pretty confident that was legitimate.
Okay.
Just based on what we're seeing, we start looking at some of the other files within that directory, within that file structure where the README file is, and we're seeing what we'll call file extension names that are gibberish. They don't mean
altered
anything.
Extensions.
They're all altered.
Okay.
So they're all encrypted. We can't read them. We can't open them. We can't do anything with it, which goes to why our hardware can't read them and work in our environment. So servers are down, appliances are down. We can't get to any of those because of that. So bad news.
All right. So you're feeling pretty bad, but pretty good that now you're like, all right, I got something to chase.
Yeah, absolutely. So you see the README, I tell the team, hold off on recovery. We have a different, situation now. My first priority is to notify our leadership team of what's going on, because they need to know. And that's going to go up, and we're going to get together and try to figure out next steps. So I know that evening I have that conversation with them. They're wanting to know what did the threat actors have? What do they want? What's going on? And it's very early in this, so we can't go into too much detail other than a group known as LockBit. And at the time, they were the most prolific ransomware group in the world. They sort of had precedence in 22 and 23. They were like the number one ransomware as a service gang. And ransomware as a service, that means that they not only had a ransomware that they would put on machines and take data from, but they would also sell those pieces to other players. So if you like just like you hear a software as a service or infrastructure as a service, ransomware as a service means they will sell their tools, their techniques, their people, or resources to whoever wants to buy them to run their own campaign. So they operated as pretty much an organization in and of themselves for years, where they have incentive programs. They actually started a bug bounty program where if people found problems in their ransomware code, they would pay them so they could fix it and make it better. They have people clocking in, clocking out, insurance, like benefits, different stuff like that. Like they run their operation like they are a company. So we have that going on. I meet with the leadership team. I give them the update, and then I make 3 important phone calls. Right, the first one to our insurance provider. Hey, we've had a ransomware attack. I'm going to need some help. Like, this isn't good. The second one, FBI, CISA. Hey guys, we've had a ransomware attack. I'm going to need some help. And the third one was to the wife. Hey, we've had a ransomware attack. I'm going to be pretty late, and this might be a resume generating event. So just halt on all those purchasing for a little while we iron all this stuff out. And that's kind of how everything kicked off.
So understand the leadership thing, get it. Understand the insurance thing, get it. Is it part of the CISO playbook that you contact the FBI?
It's part of my playbook to do it.
Okay.
I think a lot of people do, and the reasoning behind that is a couple reasons. So, FBI aren't going to come in, put hands on keyboard, right? They're not going to help you remediate. But they do a couple important things. And one, we saw that we submitted this information to them like, hey, LockBit came in. Here's some of their email addresses. Here's the IPs we're coming through. Here's what the README looks like. Just anything we could give them. And we actually see, and I don't know how much we played into this, but a few months after our incident, the FBI actually took down LockBit. They managed to get their website. They brought it down. They indicted a few of the people. Wow. They managed to do some arrests. And when they did all that, they actually managed to get thousands of decryption keys. So they reached out to people that they knew had been encrypted by LockBit who had submitted these forms, and they were able to give them keys to get their data unlocked and get everything back, which is huge, right? Especially if you just got compromised in the last week or two, like that could make or break your company getting that key. The second important thing with that is with like CISA will come in and they will not necessarily put hands on keyboard, but they'll give you steps and mitigation lessons and remediation steps on how to like stand your environment back up and get going again. So there are good reasons to do that. Another one that doesn't get talked about a lot is that when you pay a ransom, if you decide to pay a ransom, if you can give those Bitcoin wallets and however you're paying information to the FBI, they've actually been proven to be able to go out and get a lot of that money back. So they've had a pretty good success record in that. So where you might pay, that gives them a leg up on where that money's going. They can track the ransomware group. Sometimes they can get them, but a lot of times they can get your money back. So a few reasons there.
Even in crypto.
Even encrypted, yeah. Through
amazing.
The BitChain.
Amazing.
Yep.
So it's hour one. You made the 3 calls. It's let's say it's hour 0 to 12. You talk to leadership team, you talk to the authorities, and you talk to the missus and said, hold off on those purchases. It's interesting. It could be a resume creating event on the good and the bad.
It can. Absolutely.
Because I was involved in a day 0 virus event, not a ransomware event, but a virus event that took down our entire company. And we had all the antivirus software running you could ever imagine, but it was back in the days, early 2000s, when day 0 viruses were like a real deal. They came out and like the patches weren't out yet.
Sure.
So if you were doing all the right things and you had it and somebody inadvertently got something in and double clicked it and now you got it, and it was called the Welchia virus. I remember it very well. It took down every machine. It was a denial of service worm. It put activity on the network anywhere and everywhere. We had like 50 locations across the country, 51. And when I was able to explain it and provide the documentation and all the news about it, the IT team went from zeros to heroes because we were able to get the organization back up. We remediated local. From a WAN perspective, we shut down every single location and we were able to bring them back up one at a time over the course of about, I'd say It was less than 2 days, but it was days and not hours. I mean, it felt like a million years. But now, I mean, especially more than ever, especially the board, and we'll come all the way down from there. Everybody thinks you're like protected for everything, despite their decline in spend or their denial in spend. And I'll tell one short story before we jump back in again. I worked with a guy who pitched like a $12 million DR project on 9/10/2001. Okay, to a company that was severely impacted during 9/11. And the day before gave an hour presentation on why all this stuff was needed. He was a risk and resiliency guy at this firm. And they got up from the table and said, okay, great, thanks. And the guy next to him patted him on the back and said, Ed, amazing, amazing presentation. Come back next year. Man. Okay, come back next year. And there's a very long story about that incident. They, through some luck and good fortune, they recovered the firm, but it was gone for all intents and purposes on 9/11. Gone.
Yeah.
So crazy stuff. So let's get back to this event. You've communicated to the authorities, you've communicated to the wife, you've communicated to senior staff.
Sure.
What's happening next?
Yeah. I do want to pause and hit on that resume generating event thing you said, though, because that is both good and bad. We've seen a lot of CISOs and security people be fired for incidents happening, but that's starting to change a little bit, and we see a lot of companies also looking for people who have dealt with those incidents. So, I mean, I know, not that I'm like out looking, but I've added it to my resume for the future. Like, hey, I've been through an incident, I worked it. Like that's a thing that people look for in a leader in one of those positions. So
it's definitely a thing.
Definitely a strength there. So anyway, we had these conversations, we make the phone calls, and that's kind of where the conversation ends for the first night, right? I stay mostly all night, looking at different stuff. Like, we still aren't available. We can't wipe any of our hardware. We got these servers still running, but again, infrastructure is still down on the back end. Like, there's still systems not available, and we're trying to figure out a way, like, can we restore this somewhere else? How do we get this working? Like, we need to function without messing anything else up. So there is some prep that evening as we go through and, hey, did the bad guys get our backups? Are they still available? Like, how are we going to pivot into this? The next day, we managed to get on a call with our insurance provider. They've provided some resources. So now we have a threat negotiation team who are going to negotiate with the threat actors with us and try to guide us through that. We have some forensics guys who are going to be checking out our systems, figuring out where the hole was, where the vulnerability was. And then we have outside counsel who's very experienced in cyber attacks and how those are kind of structured from a legal perspective. My team, and leadership teams there. And one of the first steps we do is go out of band. Because right now we're under the assumption that the threat actors are in our systems. They're reading our emails. They're reading our chat messages. We don't want them to know what we're doing. So we do that out-of-band communication, set up some Gmail accounts because they're free and quick to do. And that we move all communication and planning to that system and start figuring out what our next steps are.
Super smart. I'm going to ask this question now, maybe a little out of sequence, but I don't want to forget it. What is an event between outside counsel, insurance company help? Like, what does an event like this cost? Forget downtime and opportunity cost and lack of productivity. What are the sort of unforeseen expenses for resources and things that come here? And the reason I want to bring that right forward is because, depending on the cost of it, and there is really no cost. I mean, some of it's avoidable in investment up front, right?
Yeah.
Around best practices and things of the like. Not everything is, but some of it is. What does an event like this cost? How much? So
there's a lot of factors that go into that, and it depends on the size of the company. It depends on the amount of data extorted. It depends on what your insurance premiums, deductibles, and everything are there. But all that said, like, for us, at the end of the day, once everything was done, even with insurance, when you talk about like man hours that were pulled off other projects, things that you had to buy or allocate or time that went into it, we probably spent like $300,000, which, you know, depending on the size of your company, I guess could be a lot of money or it could not be a
Yeah.
lot of money. The ransom was about 1.5 million for some data. So I guess that's, we saved there. When you look at some of these larger companies that have had it, so in Vegas a couple of years back, there were 2 casinos that were hit, and one decided to pay the ransom, and the other one did not. They were hit within a week of each other, pretty much. And I think one of them paid one of the largest ransoms ever in the history of ransoms to get operational again, and they got operational again within like a week or two. And the other casino decided not to pay, and they did recovery, and they spent several $1 million to get operational, and they were down 4 weeks. And then you think about all like the revenue they didn't make during that time of being down. But at the end of the day, if you actually looked at like their financials, they took a hit in their third quarter, which I think is when the attack was. But by the end of the year, they were both fine. They both made money that year. Like they weren't like negatively impacted. And you can look at, you get into publicly traded companies and it's like, oh, did your share price take a hit?
Yeah.
It might have for a couple of days, but as soon as you filter out of the news cycle, like it's back to where it was before, because it's become so much more common, and people understand that it's happening and they're not shaken up by it anymore. In terms of people outside looking in, right?
Yeah.
So those costs can fluctuate.
At the time, though, people never focus on the fact that there's going to be a dip, and then it's likely going to come back. The end of the world is happening, while it's happening, and it's unfortunate. But I've not yet come across, and maybe you have, but I've not yet come across anybody who would be nonchalant at a publicly traded company that we missed earnings, took a 20% hit in stock. I mean, look what happened with Tesla. This is non-related to technical incidents, but more political environment and sentiment and things. Tesla took a freaking dump, took a bath, man. It was so bad. And the news comes out that they have autonomous cabs in Austin, and boom, we're back bigger and better than ever before. It's like the market is so fickle and responds so emotionally to non-fundamentals that I can't change it. I mean, there's nothing I'm going to do to change it, but it's what happens, what people do, what investors do. And so if you get whacked with a cyber threat, it's, people think it's the end of the world. And in some cases it can be the end of a company, depending on the approach. Yeah.
We've seen, you pick Tesla, and they're probably the biggest swing up and down in history.
I mean, it's a great example, right? It's a great example. Zach, if I'm going to pick one, I'm going all in. I'm going all in.
I know for me, that's been a roller coaster for several years, but there have been universities that have closed because of ransomware attacks. There have been hospitals that have had to shut down operations, and people have actually died from medical equipment not being available. And then, when that happens, it's like, who do you go after? How do you get, retribution or, who do you charge or who do you indict? Like, these people aren't in this country. They can't be typically traced. You don't know who they are. It's not necessarily the hospital's fault in a lot of these cases, but like, that's heavy. Like that's hard to square.
Yeah. Fortunately, I've not been on the management end of having to, have to manage through an incident like this. And I'm not egomaniacal enough to say, man, I wish I had that on my resume. So
yeah, I mean, I don't want to go through another one.
Yeah. But if it came, I'd have to get through it. And this is going to sound funny. And I've been thinking for days about how I would ask the question, what is the integrity like of these bad actors when you pay the ransom?
Sure.
I mean, it sounds funny, like they're hacking you. They have no integrity, but I'm sure people worry I'm going to release $1.5 million and then they're going to fly the single digit bird at me and go, oh, no, we were kidding. It's 3 million.
Yeah. Again, at the end of the day, we got to remember that they're criminals, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think what's hard for some people to remember is like, they talk about people and security, like you need to have passion in your job. You got to be passionate, and that's great. But like, you have a 9 to 5 and you're going to go home and like not think about anything. Whereas these like threat actors, this is this is their livelihood. Like they're probably providing for a family too. And if they
Definitely.
get caught, like it's not just a slap on the wrist and a bad review, they're going to jail. Like they're not going to see their family anymore. So it's a
Hmm.
different perspective on the defenders against the attackers. But do they have integrity? Well, the thing I will push back, I will say on is that when they charge a ransom and you pay,
Yep.
if they don't give you the key, if they don't decrypt your data, or they don't publish your data, which they shouldn't after you've paid, then if they don't do all that, then they get a bad rap, and you'll hear about it in the news, like, hey, Lockbit didn't give me my key back after I paid $1 million ransom.
So then
And then
everybody stops paying.
and then
the
everyone
ransom.
stops paying because they know they're not going to get their information back. So they have an incentive to at least do that and follow through. And a lot of times they do. Almost all the time they do, because they want to be associated that way. They want to have that reputation of someone who's going to, and they'll even help you. Like a lot of them have support, and they're like, I'm having trouble decrypting this. And their guys are like, well, have you done blah, blah, blah? And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, okay, that's really great service, because they want that transaction to happen. It's a business for them. But again, they are bad guys. And I think you had Cynthia Kaiser on not that long ago, and she was talking about how a lot of these ransomware groups still store the data, even though they say they've purged it. Once the FBI has been able to go in and look, that data still exists there. Maybe another group will take it later, and you'll get double extorted, or something else will happen. But I mean, again, they're bad guys.
Yeah, they're bad guys. So okay, that's a cool perspective. I've looked up the number one origin of these things, and all these groups like Conti, Revel, Darkside, Lockbit, they're all coming from Russia.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happened. Are there other hotspots of ransomware bad actors? And where are they?
Yeah. So there are nation state bad actors, and then there are like ransomware groups. A lot of the ransomware groups are out of Russia. We see North Korea has a big group called the Lazarus Group. We think it's nation state funded.
Okay.
And those guys go in and really try to encrypt companies and steal data, and they want to get paid in Bitcoin, and they use that money to stand up keep the GDP of North Korea functioning, and use it to fund their nuclear programs and missiles and everything. That's where most of their money comes from. It's a very poor country, but they go out there and that's what they do. Iran is very big, very hacktivist, very religious based, driving at some where their attacks come from and what they're after. They have their own group, and then obviously China has a lot of nation state groups that are hacking, not so much ransomwaring, but they're very much on exfiltrating and stealing data. There's a couple videos out there, like Made in Beijing, I think is one on YouTube you can watch, the FBI put out, but it actually talks about different Chinese nation state funded groups that have gone in and stolen research, like from Monsanto, like how corn, like GMO corn, how things are made there, and taking that research and from fighter jets and military installations and solar panels and all this different stuff. They steal that information, then they can build it in the cheap for China, and then they can undercut the actual providers and the researchers of that stuff. And that's kind of how they're trying to stand up and beat us in the world market in terms of products.
Cheap IP.
Yeah.
Cheap IP. They want that IP. If you've ever gone to trade shows, and I'm sure you have, and early on, I was a big fan of going to the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, only because it was a sneak peek into cool stuff that was coming out for yourself, less enterprise-like, but again, as it says, consumer. And I still love that. And the amount of people there with like the most amazing cameras, like on top of items, photographing it from every possible angle known to man. And it wasn't because they wanted to show their parents. It was like these things were being modeled and brought back, and ultimately, and I'm sure ultimately they buy one, they bring it back, and they deconstruct it, measure it, and build it on the cheap for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Between sites like Shine and Temu, everything is like, it's made of bubble gum, but when it shows up, it looks good. See the guitars behind me. It's interesting. These are all really good. Most of them are pretty expensive instruments. I love playing great instruments. I love playing crappy instruments. I just like playing. But I used to bring some of them into my offices when I had corporate posts. And I was worried always that like somebody is going to steal my $3,000 guitar or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and I'll probably get arrested for this, but I'll say it. But through somebody I know, I was afforded the opportunity to buy some of these Chinese knockoffs. And they were garbage.
Yeah.
But they were wall art.
That's fair.
So I can get something that looked like a Fender Strat for $100. And it was like, I was happy to drill a hole through it and put a screw in it and hang it on the wall or put a guitar hanger up. So it was like, it looked like this, but it wasn't this. And I think when it was done, they all went in the dumpster, you know? And it's funny, I took one of those guitars apart just to see how it was really constructed. Yeah. And I was able to take the body and snap it very easily. And it wasn't like the phone book challenge, Zach. It was just like pop, 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 pop. And it was practically balsa wood with a very thick coat of paint on the outside.
Sure. There's a buddy of mine, a mentor of mine, I guess I should say, Dr. Cole, and his company did some research on these big ransomware threat actor groups in countries. And a few years ago, they could see all these attacks coming from like North Korea and China and Russia, but they weren't seeing a lot from Iran. And we know Iran is one of the big four that attacks us. And they just couldn't figure out like why there wasn't any cyber attacks coming from Iran. And come to find out, they dug a little deeper and through a lot of back channels and really looking around, they found out that Iran had compromised a bunch of servers in China and were launching attacks at the US from China, which makes China. Yeah, again, you know, retributive. How do you decide on how to counter when you're cyber attacked? And we've seen, you know, in war, for instance, where, you know, you get bombed, you bomb somebody back. You get cyber attacked, you cyber attack somebody back. But we haven't seen like, hey, you cyber attack us, we're going to bomb you, because it's hard to attribute who those attacks are actually from now when you see things like that. Like, you don't want to start a war with someone that didn't actually attack you because someone else had compromised their systems and launched an attack. So it's very difficult and hard to pin down process for sure.
Tech Radar had an article that said that the U.S. still is greater than 50% of all attacks perpetrated across the world. Like we're the esteemed recipient of our, you know, people wanting our stuff. Unfortunate, which, you know, creates opportunity for us to fortify environments and constantly be on top of the game. So did you guys pay the ransomware? Is that how it all went down?
We did not pay the ransom. We ended up not paying. Yeah.
Okay. What did you do to get out of the pickle?
Oh man! So eventually we managed to get hardware finally that we had on order, and we restored from backups, which had its own challenges, and if we want, we could dive into that a little bit. But we restored our services from backups. So at that point, we were just worried about the data, right? So what data do they have? Is it sensitive? And through our negotiations with them, those numbers kept increasing. It started at, hey, we have 70 gigs or 75 gigs of your data. Then it was like, we have 140 gigs of your data. Now we have 300 gigs of your data. And we were really trying to figure out where this was coming from. Like, how did they get this? What environment did we have that had this much information in it? Why didn't we see it going out? Like, we have alarms set up that would tell us if that much data was traveling out, especially to Russia or somewhere like that. So what's going on there? And we're negotiating with them. We're trying to get file listings. Like, hey, tell us what you have. Show us some sample files. They send us some sample files. Show us all the file listings. And they're like, well, here's 10% of everything we have. We're not going to give you anything else. If you don't pay, we post. You have to make the decision from this 10% of the file names. So the decision was for leadership to sort of make. I was in those circles, but it's like, all right, do you want to pay to get this data or not? And we're looking at the file names. They don't look super compromising. We don't have really any insight into what's in those files, at least at that point. Now we could tell you with pretty certainty what was in it. But looking through it and it was like, is it research data? Is it intellectual property? Is it student information? Is it financial information? Healthcare information? We are a healthcare university. So like we have the gambit of all that sensitive information out there. And we just decided that we don't know where all this data could have come from. It might not be real. And we think that these files are probably fairly benign. So we're going to take a chance and not pay it. And it was at that time that they said, well, then we're going to put you on our dark web forum. We're going to, you got 7 days to pay, and then the data drops. So if you've never been to one of these forums, for those who haven't, it's on the dark web. It's kind of hard to get to, but once you get there, there's a listing of all the companies that the threat actor has compromised. So LockBit has all these people up there. It's got your logo, it's got a description of your company, and there's a countdown clock on when they're going to drop your data. And when it drops, you can go to any of those companies and you can download all of the data that the threat actor has posted. So anybody
For free, or you pay for that?
For free, usually. Yeah.
Really?
They typically try to negotiate behind the scenes with other threat actor groups, or if you're like a publicly traded company, they might go to a competitor and try to sell that stuff. But usually they just post it on the site for free because they want people to get it. And that's the pressure for you to pay.
Yeah.
So we see the countdown and we knew we had to act, and we decided not to. So when it actually finally dropped, and fast forwarding to the end, the data drops, I go out and take a look at it, and they have 2.5 gigs. That's it.
Okay.
So they were really bluffing their way through it, that the file listings we got were the entire file listings, but they were trying to make us think it wasn't. And then I'm thinking like, whew, I'm glad we didn't pay for that. Of course, I mean, 2.5 gigs could be really sensitive information depending on your company. And maybe you do pay $1.5 million, maybe you don't. But for us, it was a big sigh of relief. We were able to parse through that pretty quickly. I think we had like 4 social security numbers in that. So very manageable. Like we could handle that. That's in terms of a ransomware attack. Like if you're going to live through one, that's the one you want to go through. Right. And we just kind of moved from there and tried to move on and patch things up and talk to the people who were compromised. But yeah.
So for the people who, like, for the other example, you do provide like a credit monitoring service to them for a period of time, or?
Yeah, we do. And you know, it's so standard. And with as many compromises as there have been in the last years, like your data, I mean, all of our data is probably out there in some form or fashion. And these were students, they were old students who had graduated out, but I talked to a couple of them on the phone, and the only question I got about it was like, where are you sending this? I have 2 addresses. Like, then no one really cared. Like, it happened. They were just like, oh, okay, we'll take credit monitoring and move on. And like, that's kind of it for us. No one, really screamed about it. We had like a bunch of student grades went out there, but when you think about a student who's graduated 10 years ago, like they don't care that, their A's and B's and, stuff's out there. Like, it doesn't even affect them at all.
It's also generational too, because I have a very good friend who many, many, many years ago wanted to rent a saxophone. And I don't remember if it was kids or maybe he was getting back into sax himself. And this he's in his 50s now, definitely. And this was years ago, but again, generational. And the guy renting the saxophone said to him, hey, great, fill out this form. So he fills out the form and he leaves out his social security number. The guy says, I need your social security number. Well, why you didn't fill out the form? He goes, I'm renting a saxophone for you. I'm not giving you my social security number. It's private. And he said, yeah, but if you don't give me your social security number, you have my instrument. Like, I need the details to be able to track you down, your credit and whatnot. You can't rent it. And he was like, F you, I'm not renting it from you then. And he was like, done. My kids, I think their t-shirt has their social security number. I print it on their chest. They're like, yeah, it's my social, there's this whole, we have more things around security. We've got strong passwords. We've got 2-factor authentication. We've got pass keys. Like, we got a fingerprint pad as part of the pass key, or a QR code, or a facial recognition. And like,
sure.
And so I think the generations, and certainly the younger generations, I'm not sure how far out of college, these students were, but I could imagine the closer they were to graduation, the more cavalier they were about, okay, well, we'll figure it out and done. But if it were somebody who graduated, 30, 40 years ago, it would have been the end of the universe. You might have even gotten a lawsuit.
Yeah. I know there was a time, and it was a very long time ago, maybe 40 years ago or so, where like the military would even they would actually label like your last name, and it would have like your social on it. And it wasn't used as like a security identifier back then. It was just sort of a number associated with you, and then you could get your social, security benefits later. But like, they would like label that stuff everywhere, and then it started getting used more in systems as this very specific, unique identifier and security code. Like, it had to be you to get certain things, and it became more secret. And then it started getting compromised everywhere. Now, a lot of companies still use it, but we got to move away from it. It's like not a good form anymore. It's been compromised way too many times for that to be very unique and identifying and stuff.
So how long did the whole restoration take you guys during that time?
So, from that initial phone call on April the 13th, let's see, it was June 16th, almost 2 months from when we got the call to when the data dropped. So about 2 months, we were pretty much recovered by then in terms of hardware. notification to people had happened. And that's when that kind of kicked off, which right at the tail end of that, we had a whole host of like third-party compromise stuff happen. So that like providers we use, that was when Move It got really big, if you remember Move It in the news. So that happened, and a few of our big providers got hit. So we're at a point like 2 months in, we've notified everyone. And when you do that in an organization, every problem that everyone has now is all related back to the ransomware. Like, oh, my keyboard's squeaking. It's probably a ransomware attack. Like,
they got me.
People saying like, I had money stolen out of my personal bank account. Like, that's probably because of that ransomware attack. It's like, no, probably not. and you're having to like go through.
I'm sorry. I'm just laughing
things.
Because it's
all these problems.
That's great.
And then all these other companies like start getting compromised from Move It. So we had 3 or 4 companies within a week all get compromised from the same thing right after we're wrapping up ours. And it's like, you got to go back out to your constituents and your people and say, hey, this has been compromised. This is but not because of us, like not us.
Yeah.
That's their own stuff. But also your data is probably there in compromise. And it's not a good trust building time. It's very difficult.
I'm laughing because the same guy with the saxophone got a call from his in-laws once. He said, hey, I'm having a problem with my computer. Can you come over and take a look at it? And so they go over, he takes a look at it, tweaks it up, fixes it, whatever. And at the time, it was still a dial-up, still a modem plugged into an RJ11 in the wall. And so the next day, there's a power outage in the neighborhood. And he gets a scathing call from his mother-in-law. The power is out at the house. What did you do while you were here?
That's right.
He's like, what are you talking about? The power's out in your neighborhood. But somehow it was related to him just, touching, plugging in like something he must have done.
Oh yeah.
But I can imagine with the ransomware, it's on steroids. I want to go back to something. Who is a part of the decision-making process, whether to pay or not pay the ransomware? And were there mixed opinions?
For the most part, we were all pretty much in agreement. And when I say all, that's the president of the university. We have our own inside counsel. I'm there. Dean of students or chief advisory officer. We have a couple other VPs in the room, chief operating officer, chief financial officer. The players that you would think would be there. It's a pretty tight-knit group. We're discussing. I remember the president at the time asking, like, Zach, do you think we should pay? And I don't say it's the CISO's job or the CIO's job to make that decision. It's not. Again, it's a business decision, and it's going to be very dependent on what data is out there and how important it is for you guys to operate. Like, there are times when it's probably business justified to pay the ransom, though it pains me to say that. And I don't ever want to be in that situation because I'm very much against paying that ransom. But it could happen. So
I'm going to ask ChatGPT, what percentage of companies pay ransom?
That's going to be hard to know, too, because if they don't report it. Yeah. If they don't report, we won't know.
Yeah, no, they don't report it. But I'm just curious to see what it says.
And we see attacks rise every year. Like the amount of people that are compromised increases year over year. We've gotten much better at responding. So like paying the ransom has gone down year over year in the last few years, but we've not gotten any better at stopping.
So here's a couple of perspectives. There was Sophos issued a report in 2025. According to the State of Ransomware 2025 report by Sophos, they surveyed 3,400 IT and cybersecurity leaders across 17 countries, and 46% of companies that suffered ransomware attack reported paying the ransom demand. So that's one of those things where I don't think people would say yes if it were no.
Mm-hmm. So
if anything, maybe it's greater than that.
Yeah. I would say at least greater than that, but not less than,
Yeah, not less than. Coveware Security Affairs, an incident response firm, Coveware, shows that 23% of ransomware victims paid attackers in the third quarter of 2025, a historical low, by the way, and a continuation of a downward trend in ransom payment rates.
Yep. We've seen that almost half in the last couple of years.
Yeah. What's driving that? The ability to recover? In your case, they were bluffing.
Yeah, they were bluffing for us. If so, they're looking at like money that threat actors have gotten in the last few years has decreased, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, companies have gotten better at recovering. So backups. Not good at preventing. We're still having the attacks happen, and it's still That's still growing, but we've gotten better at keeping data from getting exfiltrated. We've gotten better at recovering with our backups, different stuff like that. But two, law enforcement's actually helped a lot of that. They last year alone, they crushed a couple of the really big players. We saw Conti get hit, we saw LockBit get taken down, and others, and that disrupts the whole cycle of payments and money that's going to these threat actors. But I think in the last maybe 10 years, it's been over $4.5 billion have gone to threat actors. So that's quite a bit of money.
That's a ton.
Yeah, but those disruptions happen. We've actually seen LockBit sort of come back in the last few months. They're trying to form we'll call it I don't know, like a cartel of ransomware groups, like 3 or 4 others that have been compromised by federal law enforcement. They've gathered up all of those pieces from all over, and they're pulling them all together in this cartel of ransomware and trying to resurge.
According to a bunch of public records out there, FinCEN.gov, Deep Strike, databreaches.net, 2022 was a bit of a record year, 1.1 billion alone. 2023, and is the downward trend starting, Zach? 1.1 billion, pretty significant drop off. 2024 estimated 813 million.
Yeah.
So that's just 3 years. That's 2.1, 3.1, 3.2. It's about 4 billion.
Yeah, that's a lot.
In reported payments 2022 to 2024. I don't have the 2025 numbers yet, but still, it's a pretty promising downward trend. And I wonder how many, if not all, get bluffed to a certain extent. Not to say that what they might have not be critical.
Yeah, it's hard to know.
So, 2-part question for you here. One is, what type of forensics did you need to do, and did you hire help for somebody to find how the penetration happened? And we'll hold that. And the second, But the second part of the question is, if you're going to restoration, like, how did you find out when you were penetrated to know to go back to a point in time restoration that made sense, that you just weren't restoring the infiltration time after time again?
That's a great question.
Pick piece that you like.
Yeah, I can thread all that together. So,
okay.
We brought in forensics experts on that day after we found the README call. We've activated an insurance company. They've given us a list of people to partner with. We bring in this forensics team, and they have some tools that they typically use. They want installed on systems. So the things that are still operating, we put their tool on, and it starts parsing through logs and information to make sure that nothing's sort of compromised on those systems. But then what we do, and some other places do too, is we have what's called a SIM, and it kind of collects all of the event logs that happen in our company on all of our systems. Yep. So that is offsite. We have, 9, 10, 12 months of logs stored there. So we go and we start pulling all that stuff down. So it's April 4th, it's middle of April, late April. We're going to go back to probably March, at least as a starting point to see. I think dwell time, you see different reports for dwell time for threat actors. Sometimes they've been in your system for 200 days. But other times you read stuff and they're like, they compromised the system, and in less than 2 weeks, they exfiltrated data and ransomware to group. So dwell time means they're hanging out there, they're learning your systems, but from like the time they start the attack, it's a very small window where they move. So we went back a couple months, pull those logs, forensics guys are going through it. And what we're looking for is, where do we think the ransomware triggered? What account would have triggered it because something had to be logged in? And then just backstepping through all that. Where'd that count come from? When was it last accessed? Where was it accessed? Who accessed it? Back. All that to say is we got to the point where it was about April 1st of that year. So, 13 days before the initial hardware's down call that I got at 4:30, that we saw them enter the system.
Okay.
From there, they moved laterally through various systems. They found cache credentials, which they allowed them to sort of elevate their permissions to access more sensitive areas. and start exfiltrating data. And then from there, we actually think from the time that we recovered the first time, so hardware goes down, we recover. We think that they thought we knew they were in the system, and that's when they triggered the ransomware that second night and brought everything down hard, to make sure that they could get away and get out without us doing anything about it.
How long did it take you to identify that point in time?
A couple weeks.
Okay.
A lot of logs going back that far. You're talking millions of entries of stuff, trying to parse through all that. So we find that, what do we do about it? So to make sure, we knew that from logs that we traced certain accounts, we knew they had created backdoor accounts into our system. So things that looked innocuous, you wouldn't normally think anything about it, but they had created higher permissioned accounts. So if we did shut down certain ones, they could come back in. We tracked that down. So when we finally got around to being able to do restores, which again, we had problems with that, but when we finally got to it, we restored back to a point in mid-March, which you lose a lot of data doing that, but it's better than letting the threat actors back in, right? You do what you have to do to get going. So we restored back to before they were in the system. So wiped out their backdoors, wiped out their access, but we also had to make sure that the initial attack vector that they came in was also secured, and that there were no backdoors in that area as well, because you don't want to leave that same hole open for them to pop right back in.
Cool. Very cool. Oh boy, what a nightmare. Things like machine learning and AI have advanced our ability to detect things like this. And I know machine learning is all over the place, but I'd say in the last 6 to 8 years, machine learning really came into cyber tools pretty incredibly. And the way I best describe it is that, you got 8 cars on a track and they're all driving around the track, and you see that on the curves, they run to the inside, and on the straights, they run to the outside, and everybody guns it. But if you see a guy hugging the wall, like grinding the wall, doing a ricochet around it, that's an anomaly to the event. And machine learning understands the patterns of your network traffic and how things are used and can raise things like that up. AI, I would imagine, would have taken that 2.5 weeks of sifting through logs and made light work of it if it were available to you back then. What's happening in the trends of the tools, and how are our new technologies, and maybe even things I might not have discussed, but how are those new technologies really impacting people's abilities to identify, remediate, and or perform analysis and discovery post an event?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, security's been using, like you said, AI, machine learning for several years now. I know we've had some email security platforms that I would say are second to none, that use AI, machine learning on the back end to look at all sorts of different identifiers in an email address, from when the email was created. Have you ever talked to these people before? Is there a call to action? What are they asking for? Like, are they sending things at weird times? Like, I don't know, 200 plus different conditions that they look at on this stuff, and the AI parses through all that, and they can reasonably determine if you have a phishing email, malicious email, or something legitimate. And it's amazing. I think that's revolutionized sort of the phishing email game, which is typically one of the most likely ways you're compromised. So we added that in probably 3-4 years ago, and we practically never get a phishing email anymore. It's been awesome. So that's a great use case. What am I seeing in terms of tools right now? Pretty much every provider known to man is trying to put a generative AI tool feature into their tool,
sure.
In some form or fashion. Some of those places it makes sense, like an EDR, like your CrowdStrike, your SentinelOnes and stuff, to see an event and query it and say, hey, what is this event? How many users is it affecting? Where is it going? And be able to talk to it in a natural language way. Is actually super useful. I'm starting to see that on some of the data sides as well too. Like, hey, go out and find all my data that has HIPAA information. Okay, where is that data located? And just being able to ask it without having to write queries and stuff. Really, really, really great. Some tools like data security posture management stuff is using AI to read your files out in the environment, and based on context and content, make determinations on what it is and how sensitive it is. So if it's a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a 9-string number, is that a social? Well, most time what we would do, we would put a query in, and we would have a 9-string number and say, hey, always say that's a social security number or something like that, and it would label it, but it could be false. Now AI is going into and being like, oh, they're talking about financial information. This is probably this, or it might not be that, just based on what's going on around that language, around
Hmm.
those numbers. So it's gotten very intelligent there, and you're getting rid of a lot of false positives, which is making reporting a lot easier. Um, I'm also working with a company in sort of this design partnership way where they're doing the same sort of thing with content and context around security alerts. So, did this happen? Did this user update load something that was sensitive to their personal email? Well, was it their file or was it our file? What's the context of it? And really starting to parse out all that false positive noise. So, security teams have a lighter load and they're only looking at things that actually might genuinely be a true threat or a true positive. So those are some of the
Nice.
things I'm saying, which is actually really cool. It's going to really
It's
streamline
totally
things for
cool.
the defenders.
Yeah. And as much as we're using it to defend, the bad guys are using it to attack.
Yes.
And so this was
100%.
the long conversation I had with some friends recently about who thought the sky was falling because AI is going to come and it's going to be used for all bad and nefarious things. I said, well, isn't that the history of any tool we
Yeah.
have? A hammer was made to beat a nail into it until somebody got murdered with it. I mean, there's all these ups and downs, but I think AI will police AI. There'll be companies that'll have an interest in using AI in a more advanced way to thwart the bad guys. So I think it's a good tool to thwart the bad actors. And those who are behind the curve will get hit with AI generated attempts and things of the like. So you got to stay on it. Let's jump into our last segment here, which was something I mentioned early on. When did you decide to write the book?
So after the incident happened, I was thinking back along like everything that occurred and the stuff I learned along the way, and we were updating incident response plans and going through stuff that we hadn't anticipated. We'd run tabletop exercises and practiced ransomware incidents, but there was still stuff that caught us off guard. And I just thought it'd be interesting to sort of talk to some people about it. So I presented at a local conference just around the incident, some high level stuff, and I got a ton of questions about it. They ended up having to cut us off at the conference. We talked too long, question wise, on the stage. So as I left the stage, I literally had people coming up to me and just continued to talk for like the next hour just about different stuff. Like, hey, we went through this and this is what was going on, or can you tell us more about this piece? And I was like, man, this is really interesting. There's a lot of people that want to know some stuff about it. So I kind of did some digging online and saw that there wasn't anything that really went into the heart of something like this. There were like Equifax, the Target breach, like there were conversations, there were some write-ups and stuff about those, but nothing that really went into the decision-making process, why it happened, like from the perspective of someone working it. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I could do something with that. Let's get some more data. So I actually went out, I did several more presentations. I normally present all over the country anyway. So I was like, well, I'm going to do this locked up bit and talk to people about it. And from higher education conferences to business leadership conferences to cybersecurity conferences, I was hitting all these different ones. Even I went over to Berlin, Germany, and I spoke there on it, and the same thing, like the same trend continued regardless of where I was. People wanted to talk about it, like tons of questions, wanting to know more, wanting to know how to prevent it, what they should do, the steps they should take to prepare themselves. I was like, man, there is like a need here. And there's also this weird stigma in security. Like if you have had a compromise or a breach, like it's gotten better, but there was a stigma like, oh man, you're a bad practitioner. Like you're not a real, security guy. Like you're not very good at what you do. And I wanted to change that because the threat actors are talking about it. They've shared who they're breaching with, what techniques work for them. Like we as an industry should do the same thing. So I started writing the book in September of 24, September 24. And I got a writing coach to help me because I didn't know. I'm very technical writer, like this happened, then this happened, and now we did this. And he was like, no, you need more feeling, like descriptive, like tell us what's going on, what are people feeling, what's going on, what's it look like. And so he kind of guided me through that. But I wrote the book as a guide, like a how-to, and every incident's different, but just give somebody like an idea of what they're going to expect. Like, what are you going to feel? What you should plan for? Little gotchas that we didn't know about that maybe keeps you from getting caught in them. And you're really just helping the industry as a whole is what I'm trying to do.
Amazing. How long did it take you to do it?
So yeah, I started in like August, September of 24. I wrote the first couple of chapters and we pitched, I wanted to publish it because I think that gives you more credence to the name and it'd probably get out to more hands. I wrote those. Wiley came back. They offered a deal. I took it because they're Wiley. It sounds great. And they were like, we need this done by June 30th. And I was like, I did the math and it was like, you got to write a chapter every 10 days to be done on time. And I was like, man, for someone who doesn't like writing, getting a chapter every 10 days is going to be a lot of work. And I have several small children. So it was like, put the kids to bed. And then every night after they're asleep, you're going to sit down, you're going to write for a couple hours until this is done every 10 days, until your chapter's done. No breaks. And so I got done, I think, in like mid-May of 25. So we got done a little ahead of schedule, and now we're on the marketing track now, which is maybe arguably more work than writing the book is, but that's where our friend Kate comes in and help me through
that's
that.
Fantastic. Well, like anything else, Zach, once you make the decision, the only thing left is discipline.
Yep.
Right? So you have to actually do the work. Hey, man, this has been a great and valuable conversation, and I really appreciate your style and how you told the story. It was great. I had not yet really ever talked to somebody who was held up by LockBit. And honestly, the bluff was a little surprising to me.
Yeah. It was to us too.
The bluff was surprising to me because, and you know what? The significance of the bluff. But I guess if you're going to bluff big, right?
Go big, yeah.
Why not? You go big. It's cool. So again, your book comes out on January 6th, right?
Yes, January 6th.
Hold up, a little copy there. I really like the artwork. It's really great. Boom. And how many pages is that book? I'm just curious.
About 300.
Oh, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big one. Was the 300 as part of the requirement for Wiley content, or was it, did they have to give you a minimum?
They did. There were some requirements around it, but I wasn't worried about hitting it. Like, we had plenty of stuff. So I do some background on higher ed and why they're such a big target, which they're like usually in the top 3 in terms of industry for targets. And then we do a history of ransomware and LockBit. We do the story of our attack, and then the end of the book just does a few more case studies on other attacks that have occurred and what worked and what didn't in those. And I give you some best practice guidance on things you should consider if you're building out a program and securing.
How will people get the book?
The book will be in anywhere you pretty much buy books. So Amazon seems to be very popular for people. It is there. It's available for pre-order now, but you can also hit Barnes & Noble or Target or Walmart or wherever. There's lots of resources for it. Audiobook will follow in short order right behind it. And if that goes well, hey, maybe we'll do a movie deal too.
I love it. Is the audiobook going to be in your voice? Are you reading it?
It is not. You are all going to be spared that.
Okay.
It'll be a professional.
Okay, that's funny because I've put a couple of books out, and I'm still perfecting using 11 Labs to model my voice. I want it in my voice, but so far the samples I've done of my voice and just the tuning I'm able to do, it's not quite exactly how I want it yet.
Yeah.
So I've held off on having somebody else do it, but I may succumb to that because you can get them read by really some great pros. Pretty quickly. Yeah. And listen, I don't have the greatest voice in the universe, but it's me. So that's why I felt like I wanted it to be me. But I'm thinking that, I should edit out. But I've got a Kindle version out of mine. And mine are short, Zach. Mine are, this was my first book called The Lucky 13, Lessons in Leadership, 132 pages. I put out a book this year called The RFP is Dead. It's a battle cry for my industry. Why leaning on expertise and industry experience will beat an RFP process any day of the week. Because let's face it, people are writing RFPs with AI. People are responding to RFPs with AI. So it's like, and the art of the possible is completely gone. So all of the, hey, what else do you do for me? Or how else are you going to make my business better? Or what's your roadmap look like? And how does that really dovetail into my journey and where my company's going? And how might it change me? And so I put that book out as a battle cry for the things I do in my industry. And that also might be about 145 pages. I've kept them to about 26,000 words.
Yeah.
Much like short videos, I've wanted people to get through it, but I have been given the advice that if I do code for a publisher, they're going to want it double, which is why I asked you, was it something that came in? There's
definitely some minimums in there. I think it's like 60,000 words or something like that is usually what they look for. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm halfway there. Maybe I'll put these two books together.
There you go.
Great one. The Vic Pepe story. Hey man, Zack, thank you so much for your time and your insights and your story. Folks, you know where to get the book, January 6th, 2026. I'll put the pre-sales link for Amazon in this. So Zack, if you shoot that over to me, that would be great. I probably could just search for it. Been a pleasure having you on today. I wish you much success with the book. Stick around for a bit after we're done.
I will. Thanks, Vic. I appreciate it, man.
Take care. Please don't forget to like,